For 3 decades, Johnny Carson held court as the undisputed king of late night, welcoming over 22,000 guests to the comfortable, professional, and largely predictable stage of The Tonight Show. The show was built on a foundation of amiable banter and polished performances, yet beneath that glossy veneer, a tension often simmered, imported directly by a select few. These were not the standard, polite professional entertainers. They were public figures whose personal lives were shadowed by documented histories of physical altercations, criminal assault records, and explosive, volcanic tempers. Their presence on the air was always a genuine concern for the staff, forcing producers to brief crews on special protocols, not for a scripted bit, but out of genuine anxiety regarding unpredictability once the cameras rolled. This is the story of the few who brought genuine, uncomfortable volatility to America's favourite programme, transforming a relaxed chat into a tightrope walk between control and chaos. We start our descent into this unpredictable history with a master of deliberate antagonism, a man who redefined the confrontational interview, Charles Grodin. Though an accomplished actor, Grodin became infamous to Tonight Show viewers for an interview style that systematically crossed the line from edgy comedy into outright, genuine hostility. Grodin's technique was a study in calculated subversion. In a memorable 1982 appearance, he verbally challenged Carson himself, refusing to adhere to the standard conversational dance expected of guests. The resulting tension was so palpable that Carson was forced to take an unscheduled commercial break, a desperate attempt to simply reset an atmosphere that had become genuinely unsettling. This pattern repeated across multiple appearances, forcing the audience to constantly question if Grodin was executing an elaborate meta-performance or if he was genuinely consumed by anger. The staff, at least, saw the latter, viewing his confrontational approach with deep discomfort. While Grodin's aggressive persona did influence future comedians, his recurring appearances remain a defining example of the boundary where humour pushes too far, becoming indistinguishable from actual conflict. Moving from deliberate hostility to pure, unchecked rage, we turn to the legendary jazz drummer, Buddy Rich. Recognised as arguably the greatest technical drummer in history, a genius whose mastery and speed were unparalleled, Rich harboured an explosive temper that was an open secret within the music industry. His volatility was infamous long before his television appearances. Recordings of his profanity, laced tirades against his own band members, performers who endured his fury because it meant working alongside the best, revealed the depths of his intense, unchecked anger. That internal storm often surfaced during his interviews with Carson. In 1986, his rage flashed visibly during a performance, his face flushing with fury over what was a minor mistake made by a member of the Tonight Show band. Carson, the consummate professional, was forced to act as a conversational mediator, carefully steering the segments away from any topic that might trigger a catastrophic outburst. Rich's legacy is a complicated tapestry. The genius musician on one side, whose extraordinary contribution to jazz is undeniable, perpetually shadowed by a relentless, unchecked anger that created universally difficult working environments. Next, we examine a figure whose greatness on the field was constantly juxtaposed against legal turbulence off of it, Jim Brown. Considered one of the greatest running backs in NFL history, Brown retired at the peak of his career to move into acting. However, his transition to Hollywood did nothing to end a documented pattern of legal troubles and physical altercations that spanned decades. The pattern began early with an assault arrest in 1965 and continued with a 1968 conviction. So, these were not isolated incidents, but a systemic pattern that culminated in more serious charges, much later in his life, including a conviction for misdemeanor vandalism following a domestic dispute in 1999. Even into his late 60s, the destructive behavioural cycle had not stopped. When Brown appeared on the show throughout the 1970s and 1980s, the interviews were professional, but meticulously choreographed. Carson navigated the conversation with extreme care, focusing exclusively on Brown's film career and athletic dominance, deliberately sidestepping the controversial, documented aspects of his private life. It was a clear demonstration of the delicate dance required to acknowledge greatness while avoiding accountability, leaving Brown's complex legacy today hotly debated, a barrier-breaking athlete whose greatness cannot excuse his documented personal conduct. The volatility reflected in the performance persona is the framework for number 5, Robert Blake. Blake successfully transitioned from child actor roles to earning acclaim as an adult lead in the detective series Beretta. His tough guy screen image, however, was rooted in a genuine, unpredictable temperament that caused serious concern for those around him. During his appearances in the 70s and 80s, Blake was known for his erratic, confrontational behavior. He would become visibly agitated or angry if he perceived any disrespect in the questioning, or if the conversation drifted into territory he disliked. This unpredictability was so renowned that staff members were routinely briefed on his temperamental status before he arrived, a precautionary measure that spoke volumes about the genuine instability he projected. The volatility was proven to be more than just an act. It reflected a genuine instability that led to his life and career being ultimately overshadowed by the 2001 murder of his wife, Bonnie Lee Bockley, and the subsequent high-profile trial. Though acquitted in criminal court, a civil jury later found him liable for her death. The intense, unpredictable persona he brought to Carson's stage reflected a real-life capacity for chaos that concerned everyone who encountered it. Sold it. Everyone who encountered it. Our list continues with the defining figure of the American songbook, a man whose angelic voice was counterbalanced by a very earthbound, documented capacity for physical confrontation. Frank Sinatra. Donna. Old Blue Eyes possessed unquestionable musical genius, yet his history included a clear pattern of physical violence stretching across his entire career. In 1966, he was involved in an altercation at the Beverly Hills Hotel, where he struck a businessman. This incident was far from singular. Throughout his life, Sinatra had multiple documented confrontations, particularly with photographers, whom he viewed as invasive. He frequently responded to their presence with this. One serious 1970 incident involved a physical dispute with casino management over credit issues, which permanently damaged his relationship with the Las Vegas institution. These were not mere tabloid rumors, but documented incidents involving witnesses and legal consequences. When he appeared on The Tonight Show, Sinatra regularly traveled with a security detail, and Carson, though friendly with the star, had to navigate the interviews carefully, knowing that certain topics were entirely off limits. If the conversation strayed into sensitive areas, the singer would become noticeably cold and withdrawn, causing the temperature of the entire room to drop. Sinatra's legacy is defined by his influential vocals, yet his personal reputation includes a documented capacity for violence that remains a complex and inescapable part of his story. The narrative shifts dramatically. With our number 3 entry, Charles S. Dutton, a guest whose story is uniquely defined by transformation and redemption. Dutton is the only individual on this entire list who was convicted of taking another person's life before he ever sat across from Johnny Carson. In 1967, at the age of 17, a street altercation in Baltimore resulted in manslaughter charges and a sentence in a Maryland prison. While incarcerated, further altercations with correctional officers led to additional time, resulting in him serving nearly 8 years behind bars. Yet, unlike the self-destructive patterns seen in others on this list, Dutton's experience led to an epiphany. Fierce. While in prison, he discovered the theatre, an art form that literally saved his life. He committed himself to studying drama, and upon his release, he earned both a college degree and a Master of Fine Arts from Yale. His intense on-screen presence as an actor derived from a lived experience few others could match. When he appeared on The Tonight Show in the early 1990s, Carson lauded his remarkable redemption story. Crucially, unlike the others who either avoided or downplayed their violent past, Dutton openly acknowledged what he had done and how education in the theatre had fundamentally changed his life. He leveraged his painful history to become a successful director, actor, and a passionate advocate for prison education programs. Dutton stands as a profound counterpoint to the continuous cycle of violence, confronting his worst moment and entirely rebuilding himself into a story of genuine rehabilitation and second chances. Our list returns to the realm of self-destruction and celebrated talent with Sean Penn. Penn is a two-time Academy Award-winning actor, considered one of the most powerful performers of his generation. However, his brilliant career has been consistently overshadowed by an extensive, documented history of assault charges and violent incidents that spans decades. The destructive cycle began in the mid-1980s, including assault charges on a film set in 1985 and a nightclub altercation in 1986. These weren't mere accusations. They resulted in jail time, as Penn served 33 days in 1987 for violating probation from a previous assault conviction. That same year, his well-established hatred of the paparazzi escalated into physical violence when he struck a photographer with a rock, causing injuries that required medical attention. The incidents became serious enough that in 1988 he faced attempted murder charges, though they were later dropped, clearly demonstrating how volatile these confrontations had become. Penn appeared on The Tonight Show during the late 1980s, right in the midst of this legal chaos, and his interviews were reportedly accompanied by specific security measures. He became visibly tense during discussions, particularly when his reputation or relationship with the media was brought up. What makes Penn's case particularly notable is that his career not only survived but thrived despite this exhaustive pattern of assault, allegations, and anger management orders. Hollywood, in recognition of his immense talent, seemingly chose to overlook his violent history, making his story the most extensively documented pattern of assault charges of any major actor to appear on Carson's show. Finally, we arrive at the most consistent and arguably most disturbing example of unchecked violence in the form of Faye Dunaway. When she appeared on the show in 1973, she was Hollywood royalty, fresh off her Oscar nominations, a symbol of glamour and mystique. Yet, behind the captivating exterior was a pattern of physical violence, not against paparazzi or rivals, but against crew members and assistants that continued for nearly 50 years. The pattern was established famously on the set of Mommy Dearest in 1981, when she delivered a deliberate, unprofessional, and painful physical slap to an assistant instead of executing the staged, theatrical technique. 5 years earlier, when actor James Woods ad-libbed a single line, Dunaway reacted in fury by throwing an object at him. The intensity of her volatile reputation was confirmed in a legendary 1988 Tonight Show appearance by Bette Davis herself, who, when asked to name the worst person she'd ever worked with, delivered one of late-night television's most brutal takedowns. Davis described her as totally impossible, uncooperative, and thoroughly unprofessional, a damning indictment from a woman famous for her own difficult reputation. This pattern continued deep into her later career, with a 1996 incident involving her slapping a wig designer's assistant's hand over a minor presentation issue. The self-destructive behavior culminated in 2019 during rehearsals for a Broadway play, where she allegedly slapped and threw objects at crew members attempting to fit her wig. The environment became so hostile and dangerous that a scheduled performance was cancelled, and Dunaway was swiftly fired from the production. Her personal assistant filed a lawsuit alleging verbal abuse and harassment, confirming a consistent pattern from 1976 through 2019, 43 years where crew members were slapped, struck with objects, or subjected to violent outbursts. Dunaway may have been a brilliant actress, but her entire legacy remains stained by the trail of people she physically assaulted throughout her career. These 8 stories of actors, musicians, and athletes represent the genuine tension that these complicated, often deeply troubled human beings brought to a television show built on comfort and entertainment.